The notification chimed at 11:47 p.m. on December 15th, cutting through the silence of Luna's downtown apartment like a blade through silk. She'd been curled up on her vintage leather couch, laptop balanced on her knees, finishing the quarterly financial reports for the nonprofit where she worked as a program director. The warm glow of her Christmas tree, a modest 4-footer decorated with handmade ornaments from the children she'd mentored over the years, cast dancing shadows across the hardwood floors her grandmother had helped her refinish 3 summers ago. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Luna's phone buzzed again, insistent. The screen showed a group text from her mother, Patricia, addressed to her, her younger sister Sophia, and her father, David. But as Luna read the words, her world tilted on its axis. "Don't come home for Christmas. Your sister's pregnant. We need family time without outside complications. Sophia needs support right now, not judgment from people who don't understand what she's going through. Hope you have a good holiday. Love, Mom." Luna stared at the screen until the words blurred. Outside, Chicago's December wind rattled her third-floor windows, but inside, everything had gone perfectly, devastatingly still. She read the message again, then a third time, each word landing like a physical blow. Outside complications. That's what her own mother had called her. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled up through months of family group chat history, birthday wishes, shared memes, weekend dinner plans, her father's terrible dad jokes that somehow always made her laugh. When had she become an outsider to these people who'd raised her, who'd celebrated every milestone, who'd held her through her divorce 2 years ago when Marcus had left her for his secretary? The Christmas ornaments on her tree seemed to mock her now. There was the clay handprint Sophia had made in 3rd grade, which Luna had carefully preserved and claimed as her own keepsake. The wooden angel their father had carved during his woodworking phase, given to Luna when she'd moved into her first apartment at 22. The delicate glass snowflake from their mother, inscribed with, "To our Luna, may you always shine bright. Love, Mom and Dad, Christmas 2019. Luna's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a direct message from Sophia. "Luna, I'm sorry. I didn't know Mom was going to send that. Please don't hate me. I'm scared and I don't know what I'm doing." Hate her? Luna could barely process the question. Sophia was 26, 3 years younger than Luna, and had always been the family's golden child. Prom queen, valedictorian, the one who'd married her college sweetheart in a fairy tale wedding that Luna had helped plan down to the last detail. Sophia worked as a pediatric nurse at Children's Memorial Hospital, had a perfect suburban house with a white picket fence, and a husband, James, who coached Little League on weekends. Why would Luna hate her for being pregnant? That should be cause for celebration, not exile. Luna set her laptop aside and walked to her kitchen, a small galley space that she had painted sunflower yellow to combat the long Chicago winters. She poured herself a glass of water, noticing how her hands had steadied. Years of working with troubled teenagers had taught her to find calm in crisis, to think before reacting. She pulled out her phone and called Sophia directly. "Luna?" Sophia's voice was thick with tears. "I'm so sorry. I tried to tell Mom not to." "Soph, slow down. Tell me what's going on. Why is Mom acting like your pregnancy is some kind of family emergency?" There was a long silence. Luna could hear Christmas music playing softly in the background. Silent Night, their mother's favorite carol. "It's complicated," Sophia finally whispered. "James and we've been having problems. Marriage counseling, the whole thing. And now with the baby, Mom thinks having you there will make it more stressful. You know how you get sometimes, asking questions, wanting to fix everything." Luna felt as if she'd been slapped. "How I get?" "You know what I mean. You're always so intense about family stuff. Remember when Marcus left and you wouldn't let anyone mention his name for 6 months? Or when Dad had his heart scare and you insisted on going to every doctor's appointment? Mom thinks maybe this Christmas should just be immediate family." Immediate family? The phrase hung in the air like a curse. "Sophia," Luna said carefully, "I am immediate family. I'm your sister." Another silence, longer this time. When Sophia spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "Luna, there's something else. Something I should have told you a long time ago." The way she said it made Luna's blood run cold. There was a quality to Sophia's voice she'd never heard before. Not just fear, but something deeper. Shame, maybe. Or guilt. "What are you talking about?" "I can't do this over the phone. Can you come over? James is at his parents' house. It's just me." Luna looked at her reflection in the dark window. At 29, she'd inherited their mother's auburn hair and their father's green eyes, but there was something in her own face that had always set her apart from the rest of the family. A sharpness to her cheekbones, a different quality to her smile. She'd always attributed it to taking after their paternal grandmother, who died when Luna was 7. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Luna said. The drive to Sophia's house in Oak Park took 45 minutes through the snowy streets. Luna had made this trip countless times over the years, for dinner parties, babysitting Sophia's neighbors' kids, helping with yard work, celebrating promotions and anniversaries. The house was a 1920s colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, exactly the kind of place Luna had once dreamed of having with Marcus. Sophia opened the door before Luna could knock. Her sister looked exhausted, her usually perfect blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face puffy from crying. But there was something else, a nervousness that made her hands flutter as she gestured Luna inside. "Want some tea?" Sophia asked, leading them to the living room where a half-decorated Christmas tree stood in the corner. Boxes of ornaments sat unopened on the coffee table. "Just tell me what's going on," Luna said, settling into the familiar floral armchair where she had spent so many evenings over the years, listening to Sophia's stories about work, her dreams of having children, her plans for the future. Sophia sat on the couch, wrapping a throw blanket around herself, despite the warm temperature of the house. She stared at her hands for a long moment before looking up. "Do you remember when we were kids and I used to have those terrible nightmares? The ones where I'd wake up screaming about the bad man?" Luna nodded. She'd been the one to comfort Sophia during those episodes, sneaking into her room to read stories until she fell back asleep. "And do you remember how Mom and Dad would always get so weird when I'd try to describe the dreams? How they'd change the subject or send me to my room? I remember them being worried about you. You were only 5 when they started." Her laugh was bitter. "They weren't worried about me, Luna. They were worried about what I might remember." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Luna felt her chest tighten.
"Remember about what? About why you look so different from the rest of us? About why your birthday is exactly 9 months after Mom and Dad's anniversary trip to Colorado? About why Aunt Sarah stopped coming to family gatherings when you were 8. Luna's world began to spin. "Sophia, what are you saying?" Her sister reached for a photo album on the side table, one Luna had seen hundreds of times, but had never really examined closely. Sophia flipped to a page near the back, showing pictures from what appeared to be a family camping trip. "This was taken the summer before you were born," Sophia said, pointing to a photo of their parents with another couple Luna didn't recognize. "That's Uncle Rick and Aunt Sarah, Dad's brother and his wife." Luna studied the photo. The man did have a resemblance to their father, but there was something else, something in the set of his shoulders, the shape of his eyes, that made her stomach drop. "Luna," Sophia whispered, "I think Uncle Rick might be your biological father." The words hit Luna like a physical blow. She stared at the photograph, seeing details she'd never noticed before. The way Uncle Rick's hand rested on her mother's shoulder, the forced smile on their father's face, the way Aunt Sarah stood slightly apart from the group. "That's impossible," Luna said, but even as she spoke, memories began surfacing, fragments of conversations she'd overheard as a child, quickly hushed when she entered a room. The way her father sometimes looked at her with a sadness she'd never understood. Her mother's insistence that Luna was special, but her reluctance to explain why. "I found some old letters last year when I was helping Mom clean out the attic for the renovation. They were hidden in a box behind the Christmas decorations. I shouldn't have read them, but Luna, they were love letters from Uncle Rick to Mom. dated from the year before you were born. Luna felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Everything she'd believed about herself, about her family, about her place in the world was crumbling. Does Mom know you found them? Sophia nodded miserably. I confronted her about it last month. That's when she told me the whole story. She and Dad had been having problems, financial stress, fertility issues, after they'd been trying to have a second child for years. Uncle Rick was going through a divorce, and he and Aunt Sarah were separated. He stayed with us for a few months while he got back on his feet. And? Luna's voice was barely a whisper. And one night when Dad was working late, it happened. Just once, Mom swears. But when she found out she was pregnant, she was terrified. She didn't know if you were Dad's or Rick's. But by the time you were born, it was pretty obvious. You have Rick's eyes, his bone structure. Dad knew, but he chose to raise you as his own anyway. Luna stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the familiar neighborhood in pristine white. But inside her mind, everything was chaos. Why are you telling me this now? She asked without turning around. Because Mom's pregnant comment in the group chat, she's not talking about me being pregnant with James's baby. Sophia's voice was so quiet Luna had to strain to hear. Luna, I'm pregnant with Uncle Rick's baby. Luna spun around, staring at her sister in shock. What? He came back into our lives 6 months ago, said he was dying, cancer, and wanted to make amends with the family. Mom and Dad let him stay in the guest room while he was getting treatment in Chicago. And I was so angry at James, so lonely, and Rick was there. And he was kind to me, and he reminded me so much of you.
Stop! Luna held up her hand, unable to process what she was hearing. You're telling me you had an affair with the man who might be my biological father? And now you're pregnant with his child? Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know about you and him when it started. I didn't find those letters until afterward. But Luna, if he's your father, then this baby would be your half-sibling, and also your niece or nephew, and I don't know how to live with that. Luna sank back into the chair, her mind reeling. The family Christmas she'd been excluded from suddenly made terrible sense. Her mother's harsh words, her father's silence, the desperate need to keep her away from a situation that was already impossibly complicated. Where is he now? Luna asked. He died 3 weeks ago. The cancer spread faster than the doctors expected. That's why I'm telling you now. Mom wanted to take this secret to her grave, but I can't. I can't raise this child knowing what I know and not tell you the truth. Luna looked at her sister, really looked at her, and saw not the golden child she'd always known, but a broken woman carrying the weight of impossible choices. Does James know? Luna asked. He knows I cheated. He doesn't know who with, or about the pregnancy. I told him I needed time to think, which is why he's at his parents' house. Luna, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to tell him, or Mom and Dad, or anyone. And I can't face Christmas morning pretending everything is normal when nothing will ever be normal again. Luna stood up and walked over to her sister, sitting beside her on the couch. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, the lies, the earth-shattering revelation about her own parentage, Sophia was still her sister, the same person who'd crawled into Luna's bed during thunderstorms, who'd taught her how to braid friendship bracelets, who'd been her maid of honor when Luna married Marcus. We'll figure it out, Luna said, pulling Sophia into her arms as she began to sob. I don't know how, but we'll figure it out. But even as she spoke the words, Luna's mind was spinning with questions that had no easy answers. Who was she really if everything she'd believed about her family was a lie? What did it mean that the man who might be her biological father also impregnated her sister? How could they ever untangle this web of secrets and betrayal? And why, despite the shock and pain and confusion, did part of her feel relieved to finally understand why she'd always felt like she didn't quite belong? As she held her crying sister in the house that had once felt like a second home, Luna stared at the half-decorated Christmas tree in the corner. Tomorrow, she was planning to finish her own tree, wrap presents for the family who just excluded her, and count down the days until Christmas morning. Instead, she was facing the possibility that everything she'd ever known about herself was built on a foundation of lies. The snow continued to fall outside, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed midnight. December 16th had arrived, bringing with it questions that would change Luna's life forever. Sophia, her mother's occasional sharp comments about Luna being too curious or asking too many questions. The family photos where Luna's coloring stood out like a beacon against the uniformity of the others. Back in her apartment, Luna made coffee with shaking hands and sat at her small dining table, staring at a framed photo from last year's Christmas dinner. The five of them, her parents, Sophia, James, and herself, gathered around the table wearing matching red sweaters that her mother had insisted upon. Luna had complained at the time about the forced cheerfulness of it all, but now she studied every detail. The way her father's smile didn't quite reach his eyes when he looked at her, her mother's tight grip on Sophia's shoulder, the subtle distance between Luna and the rest of the family. She called in sick to work, something she'd done maybe 3 times in her 7 years at the Riverside Youth Center, and spent the morning in her pajamas, combing through old photo albums and documents she'd never thought to examine closely. Her birth certificate listed David Martinez as her father, but Luna now noticed the registration date was nearly 2 weeks after her birth, unusual for a planned hospital delivery. Her baby book, lovingly maintained by her mother for the first few years, had gaps where other family albums showed continuous documentation. There were no photos of her mother pregnant with Luna, which she'd always attributed to Patricia's modesty, but Sophia's baby book was full of pregnancy shots. At 2 p.m., Luna's phone rang. It was her father. "Luna, mija." David's voice was tired, older than she remembered. "I heard you went to see Sophia last night." "She told you?" "Your mother is upset. She called this morning asking if we'd heard from you. Sophia told her you two had talked." Luna gripped the phone tighter. "Dad, is it true?" The silence stretched so long that Luna wondered if the call had dropped. "Can you come over?" he finally asked. "Your mother's at her book club. We should talk." The house where Luna had grown up sat on a tree-lined street in Forest Park, a modest 2-story bungalow with a red brick facade and a front yard where she'd played catch with her father every summer evening until she was 12. David met her at the front door, and Luna was struck by how much he'd aged in the past few months. His dark hair was more silver than she remembered, and there were new lines around his eyes. "Come on," he said, leading her to his workshop in the basement, a refuge he'd built over the years, filled with woodworking tools and half-finished projects. The smell of sawdust and wood stain had always comforted Luna, reminded her of the weekends when she'd sit on his workbench, watching him craft birdhouses and jewelry boxes, while he told her stories about his childhood in Mexico. David sat heavily on his work stool and gestured for Luna to take the old armchair he'd reupholstered for her when she was 16. "I've been dreading this conversation for 29 years, he said.
Luna felt tears prick her eyes. So it's true? Rick is your biological father. But Luna, I need you to understand. You are my daughter. You have always been my daughter. From the moment you were born, you were mine. Why didn't you tell me? David picked up a piece of sandpaper and began smoothing it over a block of oak, his movements automatic, soothing. At first, we thought we'd never tell anyone. Your mother was convinced that if we just moved forward as a family, it would be like it never happened. And for a while, that worked. You were such a good baby, so happy, so smart. Rick had moved to California after the divorce was finalized, and we rarely heard from him.
But I always knew I was different. You are different, David said, looking up from his work. You're braver than any of us, more willing to fight for what's right. You get that from Rick, maybe, but also from yourself. Some things aren't about genetics, Mija. They're about the person you choose to be. Luna thought about her work at the youth center, how she'd built her career around helping kids who'd been failed by the systems meant to protect them, how she'd fought for funding, advocated for policy changes, spent her evenings tutoring teenagers who reminded her of herself at their age, searching for belonging, for purpose, for family that sometimes had to be chosen rather than given. When did Mom decide I was a threat to family harmony? David set down his sandpaper. That's not fair, Luna. Your mother loves you. She's terrified of losing you, of this whole thing exploding and destroying everything we've built together. So her solution was to exclude me from Christmas, to call me an outside complication? Patricia is scared, David said quietly. When Sophia told us about Rick, about the affair, about the baby, your mother nearly had a breakdown. All those years of keeping the secret, and suddenly it was all going to come out anyway. Luna felt a flash of anger. You all have had years to process this. I've had 12 hours, and instead of trusting me with the truth, you decided to protect yourselves by pushing me away? That's not what we were trying to do. Then what were you trying to do? David stood up and walked to a small window that looked out onto the backyard where Luna had built snow forts and learned to ride her bike. We were trying to give Sophia time to figure out how to tell James, how to handle the pregnancy, how to move forward without destroying her marriage. And we were trying to protect you from getting hurt by something that was already out of your control. By excluding me from Christmas? By making me feel like I don't belong in this family? You do belong, David said fiercely, turning back to face her. You belong more than any of us, because you chose to love us even when we made it hard, even when your mother was critical, even when I was distant, even when family dinners felt awkward and you couldn't put your finger on why. You kept showing up, kept trying, kept being the daughter we didn't deserve. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with 29 years of unspoken truths. Tell me about Rick. Tell me about my real father. David flinched at the word real, but sat back down. Rick was my younger brother by 3 years. Growing up, he was everything I wasn't. Confident, charming, willing to take risks. I was the responsible one, the one who got good grades and followed the rules. Rick was the one who got into trouble and talked his way out of it with a smile. Is that why Mom fell for him? Your mother and I had been married for 6 years when Rick came to stay with us. We'd been trying to have another baby after Sophia, but Patricia had had 2 miscarriages, and we were both fragile. I was working 60-hour weeks at the accounting firm trying to make partner. Rick had just gone through his divorce and was drinking too much, making bad decisions. I thought having him around would be good for all of us. Company for Patricia, a chance for me to help my brother get back on his feet. David picked up a small carved horse he'd been working on, a Christmas gift for one of Sophia's neighbor kids.
The night it happened, I was at the office until 2 a.m., working on the Morrison account. When I came home, Patricia was crying at the kitchen table. She told me immediately, said Rick had been drinking, that she'd had a glass of wine to keep him company, that they'd started talking about old times, and somehow it just happened. Did you believe her? I wanted to, and I think, mostly, it was true. But Luna, your mother is a beautiful woman, and she was lonely, and Rick had always been able to make people feel special when he put his mind to it. I don't think it was as simple as one moment of weakness, but I also don't think it was a calculated affair. Luna tried to imagine her straight-laced mother with her perfectly coordinated outfits and her careful adherence to social conventions, having a passionate affair with her brother-in-law. It seemed impossible, but then again, everything about the last day had seemed impossible. What happened after she told you? I asked Rick to leave. He was gone by the next morning, and we didn't speak for almost 2 years. Patricia and I went to counseling, and we agreed that we'd move forward together, that we'd make our marriage work. When she found out she was pregnant, we both hoped. David's voice trailed off. You hoped I was yours. I prayed you were mine. But when you were born, Luna, the moment I saw you, I knew. You had Rick's eyes, his bone structure, even his little stubborn chin. But you were also this perfect, innocent baby who needed parents who would love her unconditionally. And I realized that biology didn't matter as much as I'd thought it would. Luna felt tears running down her cheeks. Did you ever regret it, raising me? David crossed the small space between them and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his calloused ones. Never, not once. You have been the greatest joy of my life, Luna. Watching you grow up, seeing you become this incredible woman who fights for justice and protects people who can't protect themselves, I am so proud to be your father. Not your biological father, but your real father. The one who taught you to drive and helped you with your homework and walked you down the aisle when you married Marcus. They cried together in the sawdust-scented workshop, holding on to each other and the 29 years of love that was real, even if it was built on a foundation of secrets. When they both recovered, Luna asked the question that had been haunting her since her conversation with Sophia. Dad, when Rick came back 6 months ago, did you know what was happening with Sophia? David's face darkened. I knew Rick was sick, and I knew he wanted to make peace with the family before he died. My mother and I agreed to let him stay in the guest room while he was getting treatment at Northwestern. But Luna, I had no idea about Sophia. If I'd known, if I'd suspected for 1 second, you would have stopped it? I would have told you the truth years ago. All of it. Maybe if you'd known Rick was your biological father, maybe if Sophia had known, things would have been different. Sophia says the baby might be my half-sibling and my niece or nephew at the same time. David rubbed his face with his hands. I've been trying not to think about that. We can't not think about it. This baby is going to be born, and it's going to be part of this family whether we want it to be or not. And Sophia's marriage might not survive this, which means she's going to need support. What are you saying? Luna stood up and walked over to David's workbench, running her fingers along the smooth surface of a half-finished jewelry box. I'm saying that I'm not going to let Mom's fear and shame tear this family apart. I'm saying that I'm going to be the aunt this baby needs, and the sister Sophia needs, and the daughter you and Mom raised me to be, even if it's messy and complicated and makes people uncomfortable.
David joined her at the workbench. Your mother is going to fight you on this. She thinks the whole thing will blow over if we just don't talk about it. If you and Sophia keep your distance until after the baby is born and James hopefully never finds out the whole truth. Then Mom is going to learn something about the daughters she raised, Luna said. I've spent my whole career fighting for kids who got dealt a bad hand through no fault of their own. I'm not about to stop now, even if one of those kids happens to be my own family. They talked for another hour, filling in details Luna had never known about her childhood, her parents' marriage, and the complicated history that had shaped their family. When Luna finally left, she hugged her father tighter than she had in years. I love you, Dad, she said. Thank you for choosing me. I love you too, Mija. And Luna, whatever happens with Christmas, whatever your mother says or does, you will always have a place at our table. You're our daughter, and this is your family. Driving home as the sun set over Chicago, Luna felt something she hadn't expected. Relief. The truth was painful, but it was also liberating. For the first time in her life, she understood why she'd always felt like she was standing slightly outside the family circle. It wasn't because she wasn't loved. It was because she was carrying a secret no one had been brave enough to tell her. Now she knew. And with that knowledge came power. The power to decide how this story would end, not just for herself, but for the baby who would soon be born into this complicated web of relationships, and for the sister who needed her more than ever. The next morning, Luna woke with a clarity of purpose she hadn't felt in months. She made her usual breakfast of oatmeal with fresh berries and honey, but instead of eating while scrolling through work emails, she sat at her small table and made a list in her neat handwriting. Things I need to do. Talk to Mom, help Sophia figure out how to tell James, research family therapy options, decide what Christmas will actually look like, get a DNA test to confirm what we already know, figure out how to support this baby regardless of how complicated the circumstances are. She dressed carefully for work, a navy blazer over dark jeans, her grandmother's pearl earrings, her hair pulled back in the low bun that made her look professional and approachable. The teenagers at the Riverside Youth Center needed her to be strong today, and focusing on their problems would help her process her own. The youth center occupied a converted warehouse on the north side of Chicago, with high ceilings and walls covered in colorful murals painted by kids over the years. Luna had been the program director for 3 years, overseeing after-school tutoring, job placement services, and crisis intervention for teenagers aging out of foster care or struggling with family dysfunction. Her assistant, Marcus, not to be confused with her ex-husband, was waiting with coffee and a concerned expression when she arrived at 8:30 a.m. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said, handing her a large cup of her favorite dark roast. Marcus was 24, fresh out of his master's program in social work, with an infectious optimism that reminded Luna why she got into this field in the first place.
Family drama, Luna said, settling into her office overlooking the main activity room where early arrivals were already working on homework. The holidays bring out the best in everyone. Speaking of which, Destiny was asking if you'd be around for the Christmas party on Friday. She's been working on a speech to thank you for helping her get into community college. Destiny was 17, a former foster kid who'd been living in a group home when Luna first met her 2 years ago. She was fierce, brilliant, and utterly convinced that adults couldn't be trusted to keep their promises. It had taken Luna 6 months to earn her trust, and another year to help her believe she was college material. "I wouldn't miss it," Luna said, and meant it. These kids had become her chosen family over the years, filling some of the gaps left by her complicated relationship with her biological relatives. The morning flew by in a blur of crisis management and holiday preparation. Jaden, a 16-year-old who'd been couch surfing since his grandmother died, needed help finding a job to pay for his GED classes. Maria, 15 and pregnant, wanted to know if Luna could help her navigate the complicated process of applying for benefits while staying in school. 3 of their regular attendees had been arrested over the weekend and needed legal advocacy. By lunchtime, Luna felt more like herself. This work, these kids, this mission. It was solid ground in a world that had suddenly shifted beneath her feet. She was reviewing Destiny's college application essays when her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "We need to talk. Can you come by tonight after 7? Dad will be at his poker game." Luna stared at the message, knowing that this conversation would be vastly different from her gentle exchange with her father. Patricia Martinez was not a woman who admitted mistakes easily or tolerated challenges to her carefully constructed version of reality. She texted back, "I'll be there at 7:30. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Luna tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to the conversation ahead and to Sophia, who'd been texting sporadically throughout the day with updates on her emotional state and her growing panic about telling James the truth. At 7:20 p.m., Luna parked in front of her childhood home and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. The house looked exactly as it always had, holiday lights twinkling around the windows, her mother's perfectly maintained garden now dormant under a light dusting of snow, the same wreath on the front door that Patricia had been using for 15 years. Her mother opened the door before Luna could knock, as if she'd been watching from the living room window. "Come in," Patricia said, her voice carefully neutral. She was dressed in her usual evening attire: dark slacks, a cream-colored sweater, minimal jewelry. At 56, she was still beautiful in a reserved, controlled way that Luna had always found both admirable and intimidating. They sat in the formal living room, which was used only for important conversations and holiday gatherings. Patricia had prepared tea and set out a plate of homemade cookies, as if normal hospitality could somehow smooth over the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. "I suppose your father told you everything," Patricia said, pouring tea with steady hands. "He told me about Rick, about the affair, about the fact that he's my biological father. Is there more I should know?" Patricia set down the teapot and looked directly at Luna for the first time she'd arrived. "What you should know is that it was the biggest mistake of my life, and I've spent 29 years trying to make sure it didn't destroy our family, until now." "Until I found out the truth, you mean?" "Until your sister decided to repeat history and put us all in an impossible situation." Luna felt her temper flare. "Sophia made a terrible mistake, but she's not responsible for the secret you and Dad have been keeping for 3 decades?
Isn't she?" Patricia's voice was sharp. "She knew there were problems in our family, tension she couldn't quite understand. Instead of coming to us, instead of working on her marriage, she chose to have an affair with a man who—" Patricia stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "With a man who might be my biological father," Luna said quietly. "Mom, you can't blame Sophia for not knowing something you deliberately hid from both of us." Patricia stood up and walked to the window overlooking the backyard. Luna had played in that yard for years, building snow forts with Sophia, learning to garden alongside her mother, hosting elaborate tea parties for her dolls under the old oak tree that still dominated the landscape. "I protected you," Patricia said, her back still turned. "Both of you. I kept our family together when it could have fallen apart. I gave you a stable home, a father who loved you unconditionally, a normal childhood. And now you're acting like I was wrong to do that?" "You weren't wrong to keep the family together," Luna said carefully, "but you were wrong to think you could control this forever. Secrets have a way of coming out, Mom, and when they do, the people who were kept in the dark are the ones who get hurt the most." Patricia turned around, and Luna was shocked to see tears in her mother's eyes. Patricia Martinez did not cry in front of other people. It was one of her cardinal rules, right up there with never leaving the house without lipstick and never serving store-bought dessert to company. "Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I haven't been terrified every single day for 29 years that something would happen and you'd find out? That you hate me for lying to you? Hate your father for not being your real father? Hate all of us for building your life on a lie?" Luna set down her teacup and crossed the room to stand in front of her mother. "Mom, you can't love him like that. David is my real father. He's the one who raised me, who loved me, who taught me right from wrong. But I needed to know the truth. I deserved to know the truth." "Why?" Patricia asked, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "What does it change? You're still our daughter. We're still your family. The only thing this knowledge does is complicate everything unnecessarily." "It complicates things, yes, but it also explains them. It explains why I've always felt like I was standing on the outside looking in, why family photos looked slightly off to me, why you sometimes seemed to be working so hard to include me that it felt forced." Patricia sank into her chair as if the fight had gone out of her. "I was trying to protect you from feeling different. I wanted you to feel like you belonged completely. But I did feel different, Mom, all my life, and not knowing why made it worse, not better." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 30 years of unspoken truth settling between them. "What do you want from me now?" Patricia finally asked. "I want you to stop trying to protect me from my own family. I want you to include me in Christmas, not because everything is perfect, but because families are supposed to stick together when things get complicated." "Luna, you don't understand how impossible this situation is. James is going to find out eventually that Sophia cheated on him, and when he does, he's going to want to know who with. If the whole story comes out, Rick being your father, Rick being the baby's father, it's going to destroy everything. James will leave Sophia. The baby will grow up knowing they're the product of the most dysfunctional family situation imaginable, and our family will never recover.
Luna leaned forward in her chair. Or we could choose to handle this like adults. We could tell James the truth, help him and Sophia figure out if their marriage is worth saving, and support them both, regardless of what they decide. We could make sure this baby grows up surrounded by people who love them, even if the circumstances of their conception were complicated. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple. It's the hardest thing any of us will ever have to do. But Mom, we can't build a healthy future on top of more lies. This family has been carrying the weight of this secret for my entire life. Don't you think it's time to put it down? Patricia was quiet for a long time, staring into her teacup as if it might contain answers. "I'm scared," she finally whispered. "I'm scared that telling the truth will cost us everything we've built together." "I'm scared too," Luna admitted, "but I'm more scared of what happens if we don't. Mom, Sophia is falling apart. She's carrying this baby and this secret and the guilt of what she's done, and she's trying to figure out how to tell her husband without destroying him. She needs her family right now, not judgment or exclusion. And what about you? What do you need?" Luna considered the question seriously. What did she need? She needed time to process the fact that her entire sense of identity had shifted overnight. She needed to understand what it meant to be Rick's daughter, to carry his genes, to have inherited pieces of a man she'd never really known. She needed to figure out how to be a sister to Sophia, while also potentially being an aunt to Sophia's child, and a half-sister to that same child. But most of all, she needed her family to choose love over fear. "I need Christmas," she said. "I need to be included, not excluded. I need us to face this together instead of pretending it isn't happening. And I need you to trust that the daughter you raised is strong enough to handle the truth and help fix what's broken." Patricia looked at Luna for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. "You know, you get that from him." "What?" "That determination to face hard things head-on instead of avoiding them. Rick was like that too. Sometimes it was infuriating, but it was also admirable." "You've always been braver than the rest of us, Luna. Even as a little girl, you were the one who would speak up when something wasn't fair, who would defend the underdog, who would ask the questions everyone else was too polite to ask. Is that why you sometimes seemed frustrated with me?" Patricia nodded slowly. "You reminded me of him, of the night that changed everything. And sometimes, when you'd look at me with those eyes that are so much like his, I'd feel this wave of guilt and panic. Not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you so much, and I was terrified of losing you." They talked until nearly 10 p.m., slowly working through years of misunderstandings and unspoken resentments. Patricia told her mother about the early years after her birth, how terrified she'd been that someone would notice the resemblance to Rick, how she'd sometimes been overprotective to compensate for the fear that David might not love Luna as much as he loved Sophia. Luna told her mother about the work she did at the youth center, how many of the kids she worked with were dealing with family secrets and complicated parentage, how she'd learned that truth, even painful truth, was usually less damaging than ongoing lies. When Luna finally left, Patricia walked her to the door and hugged her tighter than she had in years. "Christmas dinner is at 2 p.m. Please come. We'll figure out the rest together. What about your rule about not discussing this in front of the family?" Patricia managed a weak smile. "I think it's time to break some rules." Luna drove home through the quiet December streets, feeling emotionally drained but also oddly hopeful. One difficult conversation down, several more to go. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "James is coming home tomorrow. I need to tell him everything. Can you be there?" Luna texted back, "Of course. What time?" 7 p.m. Luna, "I'm terrified." "I know, but you're not alone. We'll get through this together." The next evening, Luna sat in Sophia's living room waiting for James to arrive home from his parents' house. Sophia had been pacing for 20 minutes, wringing her hands and changing her mind about how to start the conversation every few seconds. "Maybe I should tell him about the affair first, then work up to the rest of it," Sophia said. "Soph, we've been over this. Ripping the Band-Aid off quickly is going to be less painful for both of you than drawing it out." "But what if he leaves? What if he can't handle it and he just walks out?" Luna looked at her sister, seeing not the confident pediatric nurse, but a frightened woman facing the potential collapse of everything she'd built. "Then he leaves, and we'll help you figure out what comes next." "But Sophia, you can't base major life decisions on what might happen. You can only control what you do, not how other people react." They heard James's car in the driveway, and Sophia froze. "I can't do this." "You can," Luna said firmly. "You're stronger than you think, and this baby deserves parents who are honest with each other, even when the truth is hard." James Hendricks was a good man. Luna had always thought so. He was steady, kind, devoted to Sophia, and genuinely committed to their marriage. He coached Little League not because he loved baseball, but because he loved kids. He brought Sophia flowers every Friday, not because it was expected, but because it made her smile. He was exactly the kind of husband Luna had always hoped Sophia would find, which made what they were about to do feel even more cruel. "Hey," James said, setting down his overnight bag and crossing to kiss Sophia on the cheek. "I missed you. How are you feeling?" He noticed Luna and smiled. "Luna, good to see you. I thought you were spending Christmas with your parents this year?" "There's been a change of plans," Luna said carefully. James looked between the two sisters, his expression shifting from casual friendliness to concern. "Is everything okay? You both look serious." "Sit down," Sophia said, her voice barely audible. "Please." James sat on the couch, and Sophia perched on the edge of the coffee table facing him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Luna positioned herself in the armchair where she could see both of their faces. "James," Sophia began, then stopped. She looked at Luna, who nodded encouragingly. "James, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be really hard to hear, but I need you to let me get through all of it before you say anything, okay?" James's face went pale. "Are you sick? Is it cancer? Is that why you've been so distant lately?" "I'm not sick. I'm pregnant." For a moment, James's face lit up with joy. They'd been trying to have a baby for over a year, and Luna knew they'd been discussing fertility treatments. "That's wonderful." James started to reach for Sophia, then stopped when he saw her expression. "Isn't it?" "The baby isn't yours," Sophia said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I had an affair, and I'm pregnant, and the baby isn't yours." The silence that followed was deafening. Luna watched James process the words, his face cycling through confusion, shock, hurt, and something that might have been anger. "When?" he asked quietly. "It started about 6 months ago. It lasted for about 2 months. It's over now." "Who?" Sophia looked at Luna again, drawing strength from her sister's presence. "Luna's Uncle Rick, David's brother. He was staying with Mom and Dad while he was getting cancer treatment, and Sophia started crying. "I was so angry at you for working so much, so lonely, and he was there, and he made me feel special, and I'm so sorry, James. I'm so sorry." James stood up abruptly and began pacing to the window and back, running his hands through his hair. "Uncle Rick? The guy who died last month? That Uncle Rick?" "Yes." "How long have you been lying to me?" I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after he died. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you ever since." James stopped pacing and looked directly at Luna. "Why are you here?" Luna took a breath. This was the moment she'd been dreading. "Because the situation is more complicated than just Sophia having an affair. James, Rick wasn't just David's brother. He was my biological father." James stared at her. "What?" "My parents kept it secret my whole life, but Rick had an affair with my mother 29 years ago, and I'm his daughter." "So you're saying that Sophia had an affair with your biological father, and now she's pregnant with your half-sibling, who will also be your niece or nephew?" The way James said it, the clinical precision of his summary, made the situation sound even more surreal. "Yes," Luna said. James sat down heavily, putting his head in his hands. "This is insane. This is absolutely insane." They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, James looked up at Sophia and said, "Do you love him? Did you love him?" "No," Sophia said immediately. "It wasn't about love. It was about feeling neglected and making terrible choices and being selfish and stupid. James, it meant nothing." "It meant nothing? But you're pregnant with his child?" "I know how that sounds." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you destroyed our marriage for something that meant nothing, and now you're carrying the child of a dead man who was your sister's biological father, and you expect me to just, what, forgive you and raise this baby like it's mine?" The pain in James's voice was raw, and Luna felt her heart break for him. He was a good man who'd been betrayed by the woman he loved, and now he was being asked to navigate a situation that would challenge even the strongest relationship. "I don't expect anything," Sophia said quietly. "I hope you can forgive me someday, and I hope we can find a way to make our marriage work. But I understand if you can't. I understand if this is too much." James looked at Luna again. "And where do you fit into all this?"
"I don't know yet," Luna said honestly. "I found out about everything 2 days ago. I'm still trying to process it all. But I know that I love Sophia and I want to support her and this baby however I can. And I love you too, James. Your family. I don't want this to destroy that." "Family," James repeated bitterly. "Right. The same family that's been lying to you your whole life? The same family where your sister slept with your biological father?" "Yes," Luna said simply. "Messy, complicated, imperfect family, but still family." James stood up again and grabbing his keys from the table. "I need time to think," he said. "I need to be somewhere else right now." "James, please don't go," Sophia said, starting to cry harder. "Let's talk about this. Let's figure it out together." "Figure what out, Sophia? How to pretend this is normal? How to pretend I can trust you again? How to pretend that raising your dead lover's child is just another marital challenge we can work through with enough communication and compromise?" He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. "I love you," he said, without turning around. "I've loved you since we were sophomores in college. But I don't know if love is enough for this." The door closed behind him with a finality that seemed to echo through the house. Sophia collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Luna moved to sit beside her, pulling her sister into her arms. "He's never coming back," Sophia said through her tears. "I've lost everything." "You don't know that. James is hurt and shocked and angry, and he has every right to be. But he's also a good man who loves you. Give him time to process." "What if time isn't enough? What if this baby grows up without a father because I was selfish and stupid?" Luna held her sister tighter. "Then this baby will grow up with an aunt who loves them unconditionally, grandparents who will spoil them rotten, and a mother who will fight for them every day. It's not the family structure you planned, but it's still family." They stayed like that for an hour, holding each other in the ruins of Sophia's marriage while snow fell outside and Christmas loomed just 5 days away. Later that night, after Luna had helped Sophia eat some soup and convinced her to try to get some sleep,
Luna sat in her own apartment, staring at her half-decorated Christmas tree and thinking about the conversation she had witnessed. James's reaction had been painful to watch, but it had also been honest. He wasn't wrong to be angry or to need time or to question whether their marriage could survive this level of betrayal. What struck Luna was how quickly the situation had moved from being about Sophia's affair to being about the fundamental question of what family meant, when biology, love, and choice all pointed in different directions. Her phone buzzed with a text from her dad. "How did it go with James?" Luna texted back, "About as well as expected. He left. He needs time to think." "And Sophia?" "Heartbroken, but holding up." "Dad, are we doing the right thing? All this truth-telling?" Her phone rang immediately. "Mija," David's voice was gentle, "the right thing isn't always the easy thing. But yes, I think we're doing what we should have done a long time ago. James might never forgive her. Their marriage might be over." "That's possible. But Luna, marriages built on lies don't last anyway. If James and Sophia have a chance at a real future together, it has to be built on truth, even if the truth is painful." Luna curled up on her couch, pulling a blanket around herself.
Dad, what if this baby grows up hating all of us for how complicated their origin story is? Then we'll love them anyway, and we'll help them understand that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most complicated circumstances. Luna, you turned out pretty amazing, despite having the most unconventional beginning. Maybe this baby will too. After they hung up, Luna made herself a cup of tea and sat at her dining table with a notebook, trying to organize her thoughts. In 5 days, her family would gather for Christmas dinner, possibly the last one they'd ever have together, depending on how the next few days unfolded. James might not come back. Sophia might be a single mother by New Year's. Their parents would have to find a way to support their daughters through the fallout of secrets they'd kept for 3 decades. And somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, a baby was growing, who would be born into the most complicated family situation Luna could imagine. But as she sat there, surrounded by the warm light of her Christmas tree and the familiar comfort of her small apartment, Luna felt something unexpected. Peace. For the first time in her life, she knew exactly who she was and where she came from. The truth was messy and painful and inconvenient, but it was also liberating. She was Rick's daughter, and David's daughter, and Patricia's daughter. She was Sophia's sister, and potentially this new baby's half-sister and aunt. She was a woman who'd built her career on helping people navigate impossible family situations, and now she had the chance to apply everything she'd learned to her own life. The truth was complicated, but it was theirs, and Luna was determined to help her family find a way to live with it, love through it, and maybe even grow stronger because of it. The morning of December 21st dawned gray and cold, with the kind of Chicago wind that cuts through even the warmest coat. Luna woke early, unable to sleep through her anxiety about the day ahead. James had been gone for 3 days, staying at his parents' house and communicating with Sophia only through terse text messages about practical matters. He would be at Christmas dinner, he'd told her, but only because he refused to let this situation destroy his relationship with Luna's family, who had welcomed him as a son-in-law for the past 4 years. Luna spent the morning at the youth center's Christmas party, trying to focus on the joy and excitement of the teenagers who'd become her chosen family. Destiny gave her speech, thanking Luna for believing in her when she didn't believe in herself, and Luna cried openly as the 17-year-old talked about how having someone fight for her had changed the entire trajectory of her life. "You taught me that family isn't just about who you're related to, it's about who shows up for you when things get hard." The words hit Luna like a physical blow. These kids, who'd been failed by so many adults, understood something about family that her own biological relatives were still struggling to grasp. After the party, Luna stopped by Sophia's house to check on her sister and found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of legal documents. "What are those?" Luna asked, hanging her coat on the chair. "Divorce papers," Sophia said flatly. "James had them delivered this morning." Luna felt her heart sink. "Soph, I'm so sorry." The weird thing is, I'm almost relieved. The not knowing was killing me. At least now I know where we stand. Luna sat down across from her sister, noticing how much weight Sophia had lost in the past week. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, and she moved with the careful precision of someone trying not to fall apart completely. Have you looked at them? He's asking for the house, half the savings, and he wants me to keep the car since I'll need it for the baby. He's not asking for alimony, which is generous considering I'm the one who cheated. Sophia's laugh was bitter. He also included a note saying he'll be at Christmas dinner tomorrow because he loves your family and doesn't want his personal feelings to ruin everyone else's holiday. That sounds like James. He's hurting, but he's still trying to do the right thing. I don't deserve him. Luna reached across the table and took Sophia's hands. You made a terrible mistake, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve love or forgiveness or a chance to make things right. How do I make this right, Luna? How do I undo sleeping with your biological father and getting pregnant with his baby? You can't undo it, but you can take responsibility for it, learn from it, and make sure this baby knows they're wanted and loved regardless of how they were conceived. Sophia looked down at her still flat stomach. I've been so focused on the shame and the complications that I haven't really thought about the baby as a baby, a person who's going to need parents and stability and love. Tell me what you're thinking. I'm thinking that I'm 26 years old, about to be divorced, pregnant with my dead lover's child, and I have no idea how to be a single mother. I'm thinking that this baby is going to grow up asking questions I don't know how to answer. I'm thinking that maybe James is right to leave because how do you build a life on top of something this fucked up? Luna had rarely heard her sister swear, and the raw pain in her voice was heartbreaking. Soph, some of the strongest people I know grew up in complicated situations. The kids I work with every day are proof that you can overcome almost anything if you have even one adult in your life who loves you unconditionally. And you think I can be that adult? I think you're already that adult. You've been caring for sick children for 4 years. You have more love and compassion in your little finger than most people have in their whole bodies. This baby is lucky to have you as a mother. Sophia started crying again, but this time it seemed more like relief than despair. Will you help me? She asked. I know it's asking a lot, given that this baby is technically your half-sibling, but will you help me figure out how to do this? Of course, Luna said without hesitation. We're family, all 3 of us. That evening, Luna's parents called a family meeting. They gathered in the living room where Luna had learned the truth just a week ago, but the dynamic was entirely different now. David sat next to Patricia on the couch, holding her hand. Sophia curled up in the armchair, wrapped in one of their mother's afghans. Luna took her usual spot on the floor, leaning against the coffee table. We need to talk about tomorrow, about Christmas, about James, about how we handle this as a family going forward. James is planning to come. He wants to maintain his relationship with all of you, even though our marriage is over. Patricia's face crumpled slightly. Mija, I'm so sorry. I know how much you love him.
I do love him. And I think maybe the best way to show that love is to let him go. He deserves better than trying to rebuild a marriage on top of this much betrayal and complication. David leaned forward. What do you need from us tomorrow? How do we make this as bearable as possible for everyone? Luna had been thinking about this question for days. I think we need to be honest about where things stand, but we also need to focus on what we're celebrating. We're celebrating the fact that this family is going to stay together, even though the circumstances are difficult. We're celebrating the fact that there's going to be a new baby who will be loved by all of us. And we're celebrating the fact that we're finally telling the truth after 29 years of secrets. And what about James? Patricia asked. How do we handle his pain and anger? We acknowledge it. We don't try to minimize it or rush him through it. We let him know he'll always be family to us, regardless of what happens between him and Sophia, and we give him space to grieve the marriage and the future he thought he was going to have. They talked for another hour, working out practical details. James would sit where he always sat,
between David and Sophia unless he preferred to move. They would say grace as they always did, acknowledging their gratitude for family and food and the chance to be together. Patricia would serve the same menu she'd been making for 15 years: ham, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, her famous dinner rolls, and 3 different pies. But underneath the familiar traditions, everything would be different. Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow and bright sunshine. Luna woke in her childhood bedroom. She'd decided to stay over to help with meal preparation and to be there for moral support, and lay in bed for a few minutes, looking at the glow-in-the-dark stars she'd stuck to the ceiling when she was 12. This was the room where she dreamed about her future, where she'd cried over boys and worried about college applications and planned her wedding to Marcus. It was also the room where she'd never quite felt like she belonged, though she'd never understood why until this week. Now, looking at the pale green walls and the bookshelf full of her teenage favorites, she felt a strange sense of completion. This was her room, in her house, with her family. The biology might be complicated, but the love was real. Downstairs, Patricia was already in the kitchen, wearing the apron Luna and Sophia had given her for Mother's Day 2 years ago. She looked up when Luna appeared, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. "Merry Christmas, mija," Patricia said softly. "Merry Christmas, Mom." They worked together in comfortable silence, preparing vegetables and setting the table. Sophia arrived at 11 a.m., carrying a bag of gifts and wearing a green dress that made her look less fragile than she had all week. David emerged from his workshop with a wooden toy truck he'd finished for James's nephew, a Christmas tradition that would continue even if James was no longer technically family. At 1:45 p.m., James arrived carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a forced smile that didn't hide the pain in his eyes. He hugged Luna's parents, kissed Sophia gently on the cheek, and nodded to Luna with the same warmth he'd always shown her. "How are you holding up?" Luna asked him quietly while the others were distracted with final meal preparations. James said, "I'm here. Some days that's the best I can do. For what it's worth, I think you're handling this with more grace than anyone could expect."
James looked at her seriously. "Luna, I hope you know that none of this changes how I feel about you. You're my sister-in-law, and that's not going to change just because Sophia and I are getting divorced." "Thank you," Luna said, feeling tears prick her eyes. "That means everything to me." Dinner was both exactly the same as every other Christmas dinner and completely different. They sat in their usual spots, said the same grace, passed the same dishes in the same order, but there was an undercurrent of tension and sadness that colored every interaction. Halfway through the meal, during a lull in conversation, James set down his fork and looked around the table. "I need to say something," he said. Everyone froze. "I'm angry, I'm hurt and confused, and I don't understand how we got here. But I also know that this family has been more important to me than my own biological family for the past 4 years. I know that Luna didn't choose to be born into this situation, and I know that the baby Sophia's carrying didn't choose it either. And I know that families sometimes have to find ways to love each other through impossible circumstances." He looked directly at Sophia. "I can't be your husband anymore. I can't pretend that I'll ever be able to trust you the way I did before, or that I can raise Rick's child as my own. But I can try to find a way to forgive you, and I can promise that I'll never stand in the way of this family supporting you and the baby." Sophia was crying openly now. "James, I'm so sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I will regret this for the rest of my life." "I know you will," James said gently, "and maybe that's enough for now." They finished the meal in relative quiet, each person lost in their own thoughts about what had been said and what it meant for the future. During dessert, David cleared his throat and pulled out a small wrapped box. "Luna," he said, "I made this for you." Inside was a wooden pendant, carved with intricate detail to show a tree with deep roots and spreading branches. The roots represent where you come from, all of where you come from. Rick, your mother, me,
This family, the choices that brought you into being. The branches represent who you've become and who you're still becoming. All of it matters. All of it is part of your story. Luna held the pendant up to the light, seeing how David had carved tiny leaves and acorns into the branches, how the roots twisted and intertwined in complex patterns. "Dad, it's beautiful!" "You are my daughter," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not because of genetics, but because of love and choice and 29 years of watching you become this incredible woman who fights for justice and protects people who need protecting. I am proud to be your father." Later that evening, after James had gone home and the dishes were done, the family sat in the living room exchanging gifts and trying to find their way back to some semblance of normalcy. Sophia gave Luna a photo album she'd been working on for months. Pictures of their childhood, their parents' wedding, family vacations, birthday parties, graduations. But instead of the sanitized version of their family history Luna might have expected, Sophia had included everything. The awkward photos where Luna looked different from the rest of them, the pictures where the tension was visible, the moments that had been confusing at the time but made sense now. On the last page of the album, Sophia had written a letter. "Luna, I know this year has been impossible, and I know I'm the reason for most of the pain our family is going through. But looking through all these pictures, I realized something important. You were never the outsider you thought you were. You were always the heart of this family. You were the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, who organized the surprise parties, who mediated our arguments, who made sure no one was left out. You were the glue that held us together, even when you felt like you didn't belong. Now I understand why. You inherited Rick's fierce loyalty, and Dad's gentle heart, and Mom's determination to protect the people you love. You are the best of all of us. This baby is lucky to have you as an aunt and a half-sister. I'm lucky to have you as a sister. And I promise I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the grace you've shown me this week." Luna closed the album and looked around at her family. Broken, complicated, imperfect, but still hers. Patricia was knitting something small and yellow, her first project for the grandchild who would arrive in 7 months. David was sketching plans for a crib, his way of showing support without needing words. Sophia sat with one hand resting on her stomach, looking more peaceful than she had in weeks. "There's something else we need to discuss," Luna said, setting the album aside. "The DNA test." The room went quiet. They all knew this conversation was coming, but no one had wanted to be the first to bring it up. "Luna," Patricia said carefully, "do you really need confirmation? I mean, the resemblance is so clear, and the timing." "It's not about needing proof. It's about having official documentation for medical reasons, for the baby's health history, and honestly, for my own sense of closure. I need to know definitively that this chapter of secrets is finally closed." David nodded slowly. "That makes sense. What do you need from us?" "I already ordered a kit online. It should arrive next week. I'll test my DNA against a sample from Rick's personal effects. Mom, I know you kept some of his things after he died." Patricia looked surprised, but didn't deny it. "There's a hairbrush, some clothing. I thought someone might want them eventually." "Once we get the results, we'll have the full picture, and then we can focus on moving forward." 2 weeks later, on a cold January afternoon, Luna sat in her apartment staring at an email that confirmed what they already knew: 99.97% probability that Rick Martinez was her biological father. The number looked so clinical, so removed from the emotional chaos of the past month, but it represented the final piece of a puzzle that had been missing her entire life. She called Sophia first. "The results came in," Luna said when her sister answered. "And?" "Rick was definitely my father." There was silence on the other end of the line, then Sophia's shaky voice.
how do you feel? Luna considered the question seriously. Relieved, actually. It's strange. I feel more like myself now that I know the whole truth, more settled in my own skin. Luna, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever wish Mom and Dad had told you from the beginning? Do you think it would have been easier?
Luna looked out her window at the snow-covered courtyard, thinking about the question that had been haunting her for weeks. I think there's no easy way to handle a situation like this. If they told me when I was young, I might have felt rejected or confused about my place in the family. Finding out now is painful, but I'm old enough to understand that complicated situations don't have simple solutions. I think Mom and Dad did the best they could with an impossible situation. Even though their choice to keep it secret led to me sleeping with your biological father, the question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them wanted to explore too deeply. Soph, you made your own choices. Yes, if you'd known the truth, you might have made different ones. But you were an adult dealing with problems in your marriage, and you chose to have an affair. The identity of the person you chose doesn't change the fundamental issue. I know. I've been thinking about that a lot in therapy. Luna was surprised. You're in therapy? Started last week. Turns out insurance covers mental health treatment when you're pregnant, and I figured I should probably work through some of my issues before this baby arrives. Dr. Chen thinks I might have been unconsciously attracted to Rick because he represented the family secret I could sense but didn't understand. Like I was trying to get closer to something that would explain the tension I'd always felt. That actually makes a lot of sense. She also thinks I need to forgive myself if I want to be a good mother to this baby. Says children can sense when their parents carry shame about their existence. Luna felt a pang of recognition. I think she's right. Soph, this baby is going to be loved by so many people. That's what matters. They talked for another hour, slowly building a new kind of relationship, one based on truth instead of the careful politeness that had characterized their interactions for years. When they hung up, Luna felt something she hadn't expected, excitement about becoming an aunt. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came a sense of renewal that felt almost too neat, like a movie ending where everything works out despite the odds. But life, Luna was learning, sometimes did offer unexpected grace. Sophia's divorce was finalized in March, handled with a civility that spoke well of both parties. James had started dating someone new, a teacher he'd met through his Little League coaching, and while it was awkward for Sophia to hear about, she was genuinely happy that he was finding his way back to joy. Patricia had embraced her role as expectant grandmother with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone. She joined a prenatal yoga class with Sophia, converted the guest room into a nursery, and started researching the best schools in the area. The shame and fear that had driven her to exclude Luna from Christmas had transformed into fierce protectiveness of her growing family. David had returned to his woodworking with renewed purpose, crafting a beautiful crib, a changing table, and a rocking chair that would become family heirlooms. He and Luna had grown closer than they'd ever been, their relationship deepened by honesty and mutual respect. Luna's work at the youth center had taken on new meaning as well. She found herself drawing on her own experience of family complexity to help teenagers navigate their own complicated situations. Her story, carefully edited to protect her family's privacy, became a powerful tool for showing kids that identity wasn't just about biology, that family could be chosen as well as inherited, and that even the most painful truths were usually less damaging than ongoing lies. On a warm afternoon in late May, Luna got a call from Sophia that sent her racing to the hospital. "It's time," Sophia said, her voice tight with pain and excitement. "The baby's coming!"
Luna arrived at Northwestern Memorial to find controlled chaos. Patricia was pacing in the waiting room, clutching a bag of homemade snacks. David sat quietly in the corner, reading a book, but clearly unable to concentrate. And in the delivery room, Sophia was in the final stages of labor, surrounded by medical equipment and the dedicated team from the maternity ward. Luna had planned to wait outside to give Sophia privacy during the delivery. But when the nurse asked if she wanted to come in, Sophia reached for her hand. "Please stay," Sophia gasped between contractions. "I want you here." 17 minutes later, Luna watched her sister bring a tiny, perfect human being into the world. The baby, a girl, they discovered, emerged red-faced and screaming, her fists clenched in fury at being removed from her warm, safe environment. "She's beautiful," the doctor said, placing the baby on Sophia's chest. "Congratulations, Mom." Luna looked down at the baby, her niece, her half-sister, her family, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. This tiny person, born from the most complicated circumstances imaginable, was perfect and innocent and deserving of all the love the world could offer. "What's her name?" Luna asked softly. Sophia looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. "Elena Grace Martinez Hendricks. Elena for bright light, Grace for second chances, and she's keeping both family names because she belongs to all of us." Elena. Luna smiled at the choice. Similar enough to her own name to show connection, different enough to be uniquely her own. Later that evening, after Elena had been cleaned and measured and declared perfectly healthy, the extended family gathered in Sophia's hospital room. Patricia held her granddaughter with the careful reverence of someone who had never expected to experience this joy. David took pictures with tears in his eyes. Luna sat in the chair beside Sophia's bed, marveling at how quickly their family had grown and changed. "She looks like you, Luna," Sophia told her. "She has Rick's bone structure, but your coloring." Luna studied Elena's tiny features, seeing hints of herself, of Rick, of the whole complicated family tree that had brought this moment into being. "She looks like Elena," Luna said firmly. "She looks like exactly who she's meant to be." As summer turned to fall, Luna watched her family find their new rhythm. Sophia had returned to work part-time and was flourishing as a single mother with a strong support system. Elena was thriving, hitting all her developmental milestones and displaying a personality that seemed equal parts stubborn determination and gentle curiosity. The question of what to tell Elena about her father would come eventually, but for now, she was simply surrounded by love. She had a mother who was learning to forgive herself, grandparents who spoiled her appropriately, and an aunt who read to her every Tuesday evening while Sophia attended her book club. On Elena's first Christmas, exactly 1 year after the text message that had changed Luna's life forever, the family gathered again around Patricia's dining room table. This time, there was a high chair positioned between Sophia and Luna, occupied by a bright-eyed 11-month-old who was fascinated by the twinkling lights on the Christmas tree. James joined them for dinner as he had promised he would. He brought gifts for Elena and hugged everyone warmly. But Luna could see that he was genuinely happy. He'd found peace with the situation, and more importantly, he'd found love again with someone who appreciated his steady, generous heart. As they sat around the table, Luna looked at each face illuminated by candlelight and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for the pain or the lies or the complicated circumstances that had brought them to this point, but for the love that had carried them through it all.
Elena babbled happily from her high chair, reaching for the colorful lights and clapping her tiny hands when everyone laughed at her enthusiasm. She was pure joy, unburdened by the complex history of her conception, secure in the knowledge that she was wanted and cherished. After dinner, as Luna helped clean up in the kitchen, Patricia pulled her aside. "I owe you an apology," Patricia said quietly. "Not just for the Christmas text, but for 29 years of making you feel like you had to earn your place in this family. You never had to earn it, Luna. It was always yours." Mom, we all did the best we could. Maybe, but you did better than the rest of us. You chose love over fear, truth over comfort, and you saved this family by refusing to let us fall apart. Luna looked through the kitchen doorway at Elena, who was being entertained by David's silly faces, and at Sophia, who was laughing for the first time in months. "We saved each other," Luna said. "That's what families do." As the evening wound down and everyone prepared to go home, Luna held Elena one last time before Sophia packed her up for the drive back to their new apartment. The baby looked up at her with Rick's green eyes, the same eyes Luna saw in the mirror every day, and smiled. "You're going to have the most incredible life," Luna whispered to her niece. "You're going to know exactly who you are and where you come from, and you're going to be surrounded by people who love you just because you exist. And someday, when you're old enough to understand, we'll tell you the whole story. Not because it's simple, but because it's yours." Elena gurgled contentedly, as if she understood that love was more complicated than biology, that family was more expansive than genetics, and that sometimes the most beautiful things came from the most unexpected places. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing Chicago in the same pristine white that had covered the city on the night Luna's world had changed forever. But this time, as she watched the flakes drift past the window, Luna felt only peace. She was Rick's daughter and David's daughter and Patricia's daughter. She was Sophia's sister and Elena's aunt and half-sister. She was a woman who had built her life around helping broken families heal and who had learned to apply those same principles to her own complicated circumstances. Most importantly, she was home. Not in a building or a city, but in the messy, imperfect, beautiful reality of a family that had chosen love over fear, truth over secrets, and each other over the easy path of walking away. The DNA test had confirmed what Luna had suspected her entire life, that biology was only part of the story. The rest was written in daily choices, in showing up when things got hard and choosing to love people even when they disappointed you. As she drove home through the snowy streets, Luna thought about the text message that had started it all. "Don't come home for Christmas." But she had come home, not just to Christmas dinner, but to herself, to her truth, to the family that had always been hers, even when she hadn't understood how all the pieces fit together. And now, as Elena grew up surrounded by love and honesty, Luna knew that the next generation would inherit something better than secrets and shame. They would inherit the knowledge that family was something you built with intention, that love was something you chose every day, and that even the most complicated stories could have happy endings if you were brave enough to tell the truth. The snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed midnight. A new year was beginning, and with it, all the possibilities that came from finally knowing exactly who you were and where you belonged. Luna smiled and drove toward home, carrying with her the certainty that some gifts, like truth, like love, like the courage to face hard things together, were worth waiting 29 years to receive. Thank you for listening to Don't Come Home for Christmas, Your Sister's Pregnant. If this story of family secrets, unexpected revelations, and the complicated beauty of love touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more emotionally powerful stories that explore the depths of human relationships.